Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Fran of Frantastic Pins, and today we're talking about fantasy pins. If you are a returning subscriber, welcome back as always, my friends. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel, we love to talk about Disney pins and Disney things. This video is coming to you while, well, as I'm recording, I'm 39 weeks pregnant, so we could already have had our baby by now. But again, we're pre-recording. Today we're talking about fantasy pins. I found a pin in my pin mail bin that I forgot to include in some past recordings, and it's only one pin, so I figured, hey, it's a fantasy pin. Why not sit down and talk to you all about what is a fantasy pin if you don't know what it is, but also share with you guys all the fantasy pins that I currently own. So a fantasy pin is a pin that is made by a fan. So it's like if you think about like a pin that you had like dreamed of that doesn't exist, it's kind of like made up in your fantasy. That's a fantasy pin, because a fantasy pin maker takes that dream, takes that fantasy of theirs or yours and makes it into a pin. They're not always Disney, but most of the fantasy pins I own are Disney. So a Disney fantasy pin is a fan-made pin. It is not licensed by Disney or one of its entities, totally made by a small shop, a fan, an artist. So because they are not licensed by Disney, you cannot trade fantasy pins at the parks with the cast members. So when you go up to cast members who are wearing lanyards, or if you walk into a store and there's a pin board, you cannot trade these pins with them. However, there is a pocket of pin traders who will trade fantasy pins. If you have any questions around fantasy pins, or if you yourself are a fantasy pin collector and there's some other facts that maybe I missed in talking about fantasy pins, feel free to add them in the comments below. But I do have a fantasy pin that I purchased. This is my most recent fantasy pin purchase. I purchased directly from the maker, and the maker of this pin is Pins and Palms, and this is a large pin. So let me go ahead and show you a close-up of it. This is of the Aristocats, and it is a film strip with 4 panels, and each panel has a different pose that the 3 Aristokitties are making. So here is the top one. We've got a pretty regular photo here. We've got one here with, again, Marie as the center of attention and her brother's not really feeling it. And then we have a fight breakout with Toulouse as kind of the main attraction. Well, Toulouse is paying attention to the camera, and then the other 2 are fighting in the back. And then we've got a cute one here where they're messing with some paint. So we've got, I would say this is kind of like a 4-in-1 pin, because you have like 4 of the cutest pictures of the cats. And one of the things I want to note about this pin that I love is that their bows are glittery in every single frame. So I love that little detail. It is a super large pin. It's silver plated. These are the 2 pin posts here. And as you can see, it's made by Pins and Palms, and this is a limited edition of 75. Very small edition sizes, obviously, because fantasy pins, you have to really market yourself a lot to be able to make a lot. So a lot of times fantasy pin makers will make a very small edition size. I think 75 is pretty large of an edition size for fantasy pins. I usually have seen like LE15, LE30, LE50. 75 is amazing. When you see LE75, that means 75 A grade fantasy pins, or grade A. And what that means, it's basically like the most flawless version of the pins, because these pin makers will they'll order more than 75 from the manufacturer. But then when they receive the pins from the manufacturer, the pin makers go ahead and quality check every single pin. And so they will categorize their pins as grade A, which is as flawless as you can get, grade B with maybe like 1 minor flaw, and then grade C with maybe there's like a scratch, or like the paint wasn't right in this corner. The grade will be determined by the pin seller, but usually grade A goes to people who maybe pre-order and prepaid for the pin. So this is actually a grade A. I wanted to support Pins and Palms, and so I'm really excited about this pin. All right, so now what I want to do is actually go into our pin books and show you guys some other fantasy pins that we own. The first set of fantasy pins I want to share with you are here on this board. I was actually trying to purge these fantasy pins out of my collection, so I had them for sale on my Pinstagram for a little while, but they weren't really moving. I think a lot of people were just focused more on like event pins recently, and you know, it's like the holidays are coming up, so I feel like we're all a little more mindful of our budget. So that's why these pins are on this corkboard, because they were for sale, but since they didn't sell, I'm gonna go ahead and just keep them in my collections for a little bit longer until I decide to have my next sale. So I'm gonna grab the camera and then we're gonna go ahead and get a closer look. All right, so I will do my best to, if I remember who the maker of the pin is, I will put their handle on screen and then link them down below. This first pin is from Adriana X Fantasy, and this one is of Ariel and Max, and I picked this up from her directly, and I think it's super cute. I love the art style. I love that it's Ariel in a dress. This one is a fantasy pin of an Ariel profile from Pins and Things. Again, I bought this one a long time ago because I can't afford the real WDI Ariel profile, so I thought this was the closest I could get. These two I call my couture fantasy pins. This is from Lexi B Pinography, and this one is of Tiana and Lottie, and I got them as a pair because I think that both of them are just super gorgeous, but my Tiana collection got really large, and so I thought maybe I could purge this one out of my collection. But if I got rid of one, I'd want to get rid of both because I got them as a set. This one here is from Mint Pints. I think I'm saying that correctly, but he has a whole like sidekick collection with this kind of art style where there's like a background and then the foreground is like a setting with the sidekick character. And I just really like the art style too. It's very cute. And now let's get into the books. Okay, so the first collection that has some fantasy pins that I want to share with you is our Aristocats collection. And that first fantasy pin is here. This little circle guy with a pink Paris in the back. I don't know who is the maker of it, but it's basically pin on pin. We've got Paris and the pink background as the back pin, and then the three kitties as the top pin. On this back page, we have two fantasy pins here. So the first fantasy pin is going to be this one. It's got a bit of a translucent piece here, and it's of Duchess and O'Malley. When we move over here, we've also got one with Duchess and O'Malley and the three kitties. This one is made by Disney Chris, and I got this one recently as well. I don't know if I showed it in a pin video, but the next collection that includes some fantasy pins is my Princess and the Frog collection. And here is the first pin I'm going to show you. This one was a gift from, I want to say it's from Life Joyfully Done. They didn't make the fantasy pin, but they included this in a box swap that we did, and they were my gift givers, and they included this in the box, and I love it because you don't really see a lot of pins of young Tiana, and you know, she's doing what she loves, which is cooking and remembering her papa, so I love that pin. I have this pin here and this pin here, which are fantasy pins. They are from the same maker, but I have not for the life of me been able to figure out who the pin maker is. I just found these pins being sold secondhand, and I picked them both up because we've got the floral theme happening, which is great, but then we've got Tiana in two different outfits, which I really appreciate. And then I do have a third page of Princess and the Frog pins, and I have a couple of fantasy pins on this page as well. This one is from Mint Pints, and this one I got in one of his Instagram live sales. I believe he was selling one. I think this is maybe a B grade, but I really don't see where the flaw is. I love it so much. Next, we have this pin from Disney Chris, and I love the crossover of Tiana dressed as Dr. Facilier. So this is kind of like, I think this was called the Twilight series, where princesses were dressed as their villains. So I thought that was really great because I'm not a huge fan of Facilier, but I do love the art style. This one I got secondhand. This one is of young Lottie and the cat. I have a couple of pins of Lottie, so I thought this one would help balance out the page. And then this one I got from, oh my gosh, I think it's Enchanted Thoughts Club, and this came out over the pandemic, either right before or right after they announced that they were going to be replacing Splash Mountain with a Bayou theme. So I thought this one would be great to have in my collection as well. And next, as much as I've tried to really get rid of the rest of my Little Mermaid collection because I have my grails, these are some pins I really couldn't resist keeping. And this one right here is the only fantasy pin on this page. This is also from Disney Chris, of the same Twilight Zone series that I just showed you in the Tiana collection. And this is Ariel dressed as Ursula / Vanessa, because we do have like a little Vanessa vibe here if you see Vanessa in this pin, and kind of Ariel's attitude there. And then this book is shared with our Tangled collection, so we do have a couple of fantasy pins here as well. This fantasy pin, which is a pin on pin, and this one is, I believe, by Yo-Yo Pinstar. I will have to double check and then put it on the screen for you guys. This one is a fantasy profile from Disney Pins and Things. So I really love the braided hair of Punzi, and then this purple area is translucent. And then I do have this pin as well. I cannot remember who the maker is, but I do like the art on this pin and the lanterns in the background. No fantasy pins on this page, but we do have a third page of Tangled, and there are a couple fantasy pins on here as well, so I'll point those out. Starting with this one. This one is by Magic by Michelle Inez. This is a pretty old pin. I believe her Etsy shop is closed right now, but I love, again, the back view of her braids and the lanterns and the kingdom. And then crossing the page over here, this one is by Disney Chris, and I forgot the name of this series. I think it was called like Floral Beauties or Enchanted Beauty, but I do like the art concept. Again, love the florals and how they kind of gave her an alternate dress. The last book we're going to be going through is the one here, and we're starting off with our Aladdin collection. I've got 3 fantasy pins on this page. Again, Disney Pins and Things. We've got this fantasy profile of Jasmine with Raja. Really love this pin here. This pin, unsure of the pin maker, got it second or third hand from a reseller, but I love that it's Aladdin and Jasmine. And then this one is by Disney Chris. This is the Just You and I series, and so it's kind of a rectangular background with the couple and their eyes closed, and then some fun little details in the corners here. So we're moving on to my very small, my small humble Pocahontas collection. Majority of these are fantasy pins. So this one is similar to the Tiana pins I had shared a little while ago. We've got the floral border and then some great art of the princess. This one here is, oh my gosh, I forgot the name of the I'm gonna put it on the screen because my pregnancy brain is working against me right now. I love the purple and blue streaks in her hair and the waterfall details in the back. It's pin on pin. I got it A grade, no regrets. Another fantasy profile by Disney Pins and Things. I love the leaves along her hair, and I love that Miko's on the pin with her. And then last but not least, we've got another pin on pin by Yo-Yo Pinstar. This one is a kind of a fantasy pin of that Princess and Friends collection that came out, I think, from the Employee Center. Won't ever be able to afford that, so glad that I picked this one up. It's pin on pin as well. And then I think last but not least, I have a Tinkerbell fantasy pin here, and this is one of the first fantasy pins I ever purchased. Again, this is by Disney Pins and Things. I got a lot of her fantasy profiles because I knew I would not afford the authentic WDI profiles. So this one will probably be one I'll keep forever. And if I were to lift this off the page, you could see her wings here are translucent. So that's it for fantasy pins in our collection. Thanks for bearing with me and my out of breathness. Let me know in a comment down below which fantasy pin was your favorite in today's video. If you love this Disney content, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And as always, hope to see you at the next one. Until then, my friends, have a fantastic day.